Well, hello, and welcome to Thingamajigs, the exciting history of mundane things. I am Ben.
And I am Danielle. Ben, something terrible is coming.
An asteroid.
No, someone is going to break into all of our homes and change our clocks and make our alarms go off an hour before our body feels like it's supposed to.
Is there nothing we can do to stop this?
Mm-mm.
This is terrible.
You're not even going to ask who it is, who's going to break into... It's going to be like the Santa Claus, but the opposite.
I assumed it was Santa Claus.
No, it's the government.
Oh.
No, but we need to come up with a mythical character for this event.
Father Time.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Father
Time is going to break into all of our homes because he's working for the government and change our clocks. We're going to talk about daylight saving time. I'm going to go ahead and get this part out of the way. Yes, it's daylight saving time, no S. I know that there's people out there that feel very strongly about that. I don't. I really don't care if you add an S. It doesn't change how cranky I am about being forced to not only lose an hour of sleep, but also push my bedtime back because the clock tells me it's 8 o'clock. And perfectly acceptable to put on my pajamas and get in bed, but the sun is peer pressuring me into feeling like I need to still be productive because it's still shining at 9.
Yeah, I don't like waking up early. That's all I have to say about that.
I'm a big fan of short days. I find the long nights very cozy. I get the appeal of having daylight to do yard work and whatever after work, and as we get into the history of it, it really makes sense why we started this. But like a lot of things, as time goes on and we advance, society changes, what's perceived as proper or socially acceptable evolves, and then we're stuck with legislation that just doesn't apply to us humans who live in the year 2024 anymore. And if the podcast goes well, you humans out there listening in the year, 2033 or whatever, hopefully this topic will really show its age soon because we don't participate in daylight saving time anymore. And you out there listening to this, yes, you privileged, no time jumping around lives can be thankful. Let me tell you the story of DST. Dads setting tables. Dinosaurs sipping tea. Deputies sauntering tantalizingly. Dignity stops terrorists.
Does it?
No, it's daylight saving time. It has a surprisingly rich history. Before we get into this, do you have any guesses on where this started? You may submit 2 answers should you have a hilarious first answer.
Well, we've already established it's Father Time under contract from the government, so it probably has something to do with faking the moon landing.
So what, the idea is if we take an hour of sleep from everyone, they'll be so delusional from tiredness that they'll succumb to ridiculous conspiracies.
No, it's because whenever they were sending the rocket back to Earth, because it never went to space, they needed to do it at night, but it was like cutting it kind of close, and they didn't want anyone to see it coming back down, so they moved the time up so that everybody would be in bed whenever it was falling in the ocean.
And then did you have a second real answer?
I don't know. I always heard it had something to do with Benjamin Franklin and a war or something.
Yeah, except for the war is quite distant in time from Benjamin Franklin. They wouldn't have corresponded. So Benjamin Franklin is often blamed for daylight saving time, which is only partially true. He didn't invent it per se, but he is the first to mention the idea of messing with our clocks in order to utilize the sunshine. And he didn't really want to mess with the clocks. He just wanted people to take advantage of the sun and it giving you free light. In 1784, he wrote an essay in the Journal de Paris. I really wanted to read the original essay myself, but it's in French, so I just read the translated version. That was very easy to find on the internet. So he tells the story of how he had gotten home 3 or 4 hours after midnight. I think it was normal for people to be out that late because of what he goes on to say in the essay, but also, what was he doing on the streets of Paris at 3 and 4 in the morning, Mr. Franklin? He was pretty well known for his affection for women. What he was doing is not important to the story. I just thought it was interesting that he was out so late. So he goes on to say that an accidental sudden noise woke him up at 6 in the morning, and he was very surprised about how full of light his room was. He thought that a bunch of lamps had been brought to his room. And I guess as he became more awake and conscious, he realized that the light was coming from his window. Someone failed to close his shutters the night before. So he gets up, and this is a quote because he worded it so funny. I wanted to tell it exactly as he did. I got up and looked out to see what might be the occasion of it, when I saw the sun just rising above the horizon, from whence he poured his rays plentifully into my chamber. I'm guessing it's because French has gendered words, but I think it's funny that he calls the sun by a male pronoun. It somehow makes the story warmer, which is also funny because it's the sun. So he's amazed. He looks at his watch, very confident that it is correct, and I know this because he says that his watch goes very well. He grabs his almanac, because surely this is a phenomena. But indeed, no, this was simply when the sun rose and would continue to rise earlier and earlier until towards the end of June.
He never before realized that the sun changes when it rises?
No. He never before realized how early the sun came up. This is the part I mentioned about how it must have been normal for people to stay out late, because he goes on to say, "You readers, who with me have never seen any sign of sunshine before noon, and seldom regard the astronomical part of the almanac, will be as much astonished as I was when they hear of his rising so early, especially when I assure them that he gives light as soon as he rises. I'm convinced of this. I am certain of my fact. One cannot be more certain of any fact. I saw it with my own eyes and have repeated this observation the 3 following mornings. I have found always precisely the same result."
Benjamin Franklin an idiot?
I should also mention that this essay was considered like satirical, so a lot of people think that it was a joke.
I hope so.
I read this to you because I really wanted to demonstrate how astonished he was at this discovery, and it wasn't just him. He goes on to talk about sharing this with other people, and they didn't believe him. One person, who he described as a learned natural philosopher, told him that there could be no light at that hour, and that his window shutter being left open instead of letting in light must have simply let the darkness out.
Why are they all dumb?
He used the word ingenious arguments to show how he might have been deceived. He didn't have this word, but he was totally being gaslit. Benjamin Franklin, being the lover of frugality that he was, obviously saw that there was some money to be saved. They were sleeping through 6 hours of free daylight and using expensive artificial light for the 6 hours they stayed up after the sun went down. The candles weren't exactly cheap, and even the cheapest candles were not as cheap as the sun, and not nearly as effective. So he does a bunch of math to calculate how many candles he thinks families were using and the cost the city of Paris could have saved by simply living by the sun. He wasn't suggesting moving the clock, though. He thought it would be more practical to tax people with shutters on their windows and cap the amount of candles people could buy per week. Also, maybe guards posted to stop any traffic that wasn't like doctors or midwives, so I guess any emergency services were fine, but no recreational travel at night. And on top of that, he also suggested that as soon as the sun rises, ring all the bells in every church. And if that wasn't enough, cannon fire.
I feel like this is a bit out of idiocracy. Was everybody really this dumb back then?
In the last paragraph of the essay, he says that he doesn't expect pension or privilege for bestowing this great discovery. He will only accept the honor of it. And he doesn't dispute that people knew when the sun rose. What he thinks he deserves recognition for is the discovery that the sun gives light as soon as it rises.
Did they think it was like turned off? And it would like come up around noon and be like, all right, it's time, and then flip on?
I don't know. I think that they thought maybe it was just a gradual brightening of the day, which kind of is true. I mean, when the sun is rising, there is a portion of time where the sky is very dimly lit. But as soon as the sun comes up, I mean, it's daytime. I think they just thought that portion lasted longer. I know we spent a lot of time on Franklin, but really time well spent. That was truly something. I should also say that a lot of people don't think that it was very serious essay, so I'm calling it whimsical. I don't really know what to take from that. I'm notoriously bad at picking up sarcasm. He seemed pretty serious to me, but then again, everyone does. I'm a very literal person. Maybe their sense of humor was just really different. Very, very unique.
Certainly was. Maybe if they heard us saying this right now, they'd think we were idiots.
George Vernon Hudson was a British entomologist, and he was into bugs from a very young age. By the time he was 14, he had a fairly impressive insect collection, which is about the time he moved to New Zealand. I'm uncertain if he brought his bug collection with him. But George Hudson was the first to recommend what is the closest to daylight saving time that we have today. He was a big fan of going insect hunting after his shift work ended, but of course that is one of those hobbies that you have to have at least some light, and he wanted more of his free time to be in the daylight hours. So he wrote a paper for Wellington Philosophical Society in 1895, where he suggested that we move our clocks 2 hours. Everyone thought the idea was interesting, and he wrote a second paper 3 years later in 1898, but still nothing came of it. That's the story that I knew. If someone asked me why we have daylight saving time, I would have blamed George Hudson. Some dude wanted more time to chase butterflies.
I don't understand why they credit Benjamin Franklin. I'd be happier giving old Georgie boy there the credit.
I think Benjamin Franklin is credited more just for the idea of utilizing the sun to our advantage. Because he didn't even want to change the clocks. He just wanted people to get up earlier by cannon fire. Do you know how angry I would be if bells and cannon fire rang every morning at 6 a.m.? Also, I don't remember exactly what time the window tax was happening, but I think it was somewhere around there. So you're going to be taxed for your window glass. And if you had shutters, you were going to be taxed for your shutters, which none of that happened. I'm just saying that's a lot of taxing on my house and windows and window accessories. The second man who is credited with the idea of daylight saving time is William Willett, which, can we just appreciate that name for a minute? His name was Will. His idea was a little different, though, because he thought we should slowly move the clock forward. So for the 4 Sundays that are in April, he wanted to shift the clock 20 minutes and then do the reversed for the 4 Sundays in September. That is 8 clock changes every year.
Kind of smart. Be really annoying to keep track of, especially in the modern age when you'd have to program something in. I mean, it's already really annoying in programming to keep track of daylight saving time, but
it is the proper way to do it. We'll get into that more, but as far as transitioning your body, it is the best way to do that. People thought it was interesting, and a bill was introduced to the House of Commons in 1908, but it was opposed, especially by farmers who were not interested at all in any way. So nothing came of it. And then he died 1 year before it became popular in 1916. Not his plan exactly, but close enough that he probably would have been pleased. He's buried under a sundial that says, "I only count the sunny hours."
Interesting.
Isn't that lovely? First of all, his headstone is a sundial. And he only counts the sunny hours. It's beautiful.
I guess. It's a little weird, but whatever.
It's a sundial, and it only counts the sunny hours. That's hilarious.
Yeah. Does he only count the sunny hours? He's saying that hours when the sun's not out are pointless, waste of time?
Yes, I believe he is. So first we need to understand time zones. Do you know off the top of your head how many time zones the United States has?
The United States?
I will take several answers.
The contiguous United States?
However you want to answer it.
I'm going to give it my best shot here. 8.
Wow, that's actually really close. So I would have accepted 6 because we have 4 continental and then Alaska and Hawaii are their own thing. If you include the territories that the U.S. claims, we technically have 9. So towards the beginning of America's history, we didn't have standardized time. All of America, they just kind of did their own thing. They had like over 100 time zones. Each town kind of governed their own time, which is ridiculous. I mean...
Yep. You could go from one city to another and be on a different time.
Right, and because it took such an incredibly long time to get anywhere, and as we've discussed in the past, people didn't travel a lot, it wasn't a big deal. But with the railroad coming along, giving us a sense of connection and paving the way for more travel, we came to the realization that timing was really quite important, not only for coordinating when to show up for your departure, but also for keeping the trains from colliding into one another. It's
a good one.
So what did the major railroad companies do about this? In 1883, they set up a system of 4 time zones. So it was Eastern, Central, Mountain, and Pacific. And they're all 1 hour apart, starting on the East Coast, because that's the part of the country the sun hits first in the morning. I think it's interesting we call it Eastern time, but we don't call Pacific Western time. Like why don't we call Eastern Atlantic?
Yeah, if we really wanted to coordinate something, we should coordinate those names, get those fixed up. Central isn't the central time zone. Mountain time.
They're just like, there's a bunch of mountains over there. Let's call it mountain time.
We've got more than one mountain, guys.
The whole idea behind daylight saving time was really to save money. Energy conservation was important during this time of war, so it's no surprise that World War I is when daylight saving time really kicks off around the world. Now, that being said, Canada was technically the first country to implement it, even before the war in the summer of 1908. The people of Port Arthur, Ontario, which is today's Thunder Bay. I can't think of Thunder Bay without thinking of that episode of Letterkenny.
Same.
So they shifted their clocks forward. Other portions of Canada got in on it around the time the rest of the world did, but Canada is the first to do it. We'll get into this towards the end of the episode, but not all of Canada observes daylight saving time. So Canada might have been the first to observe it, but Germany was the country that popularized it. I think Germany might pride itself on efficiency, and they were 2 years into the Great War when they decided they needed to find a way to conserve energy for the war effort, and they decided that moving their clocks forward was indeed a way to do that. So on April 30th, 1916, the world is introduced to daylight saving time. It only took a few weeks for the rest of Europe to follow suit because they couldn't let Germany have that advantage. The United States was a few years behind because we didn't implement it until 1918 with the Standard Time Act. We also added another time zone that year. We added Alaska. And it was not popular, especially with the farmers, which is funny because that's what a lot of people will give as an answer when asked why we have daylight saving time. It's to help the farmers. But no, they did not like this. Farmers tend to get up early, and when you shift the clock an hour ahead, that means the sun isn't coming up as early. They have to wait for the days to get longer naturally before they have sunlight early in the morning again. And animals don't care what time the clock says. They want to be fed and milked at the same time they always are. Once the war was over, which wasn't that long because World War I ended in November of 1918, we just kind of stopped doing it. Wartime could sometimes be interpreted as daylight saving time. We were late to the party. We only had it for like less than a year. But because it was viewed as a wartime effort thing, we put it back into place in 1942 after World War II started. Well, started for us. We got involved in 41 and World War II actually happened like 39. Even after World War II ended, we, as in the United States, kind of just did whatever for the next couple decades. It was a mess, which is why in 1966 we passed the Uniform Time Act to standardize the start and end dates for daylight saving time. This is important because this is federal law, so states cannot change the dates or extend daylight saving time, but they are allowed to opt out. Basically just says you don't have to be a part of this, but if you are, you're going to do it our way so that everyone's the same. Things were going very well. We finally had stable time that everyone agreed on, except Arizona and Hawaii, because they passed state laws to opt out. and a lot of the American territories. Lucky bastards. But in 1974, we had our first oil crisis, the oil embargo energy crisis. Something about we and some other countries were supporting Israel, and the Arab countries we were getting our oil from didn't like that, and our prices per barrel of oil doubled, which we had never experienced before. It was quite scary, so we tried different things to conserve energy, and one of those things was to have daylight saving time permanent all year long.
The fools.
Yeah, this didn't last long. The public did not support this because during winter, the days are getting shorter, and with the time, the way it was, people were having to go to work in the dark, and kids were standing at bus stops having to go to school in the dark because the sun wasn't rising till like 8:39 a.m. And so it got repealed. This energy crisis is also why state highways are speed limited at 55 miles per hour. It was also a way to save money.
What were they at before?
I don't know. It was the 70s. We didn't care. We didn't have seat belts. We didn't have speed limits. We barely had cars. Our cars were rolling metal death traps.
Balls of speeding steel.
So the start and end date has been messed with just a couple of times since 1966, but we've been on the starting second Sunday in March and ending the first Sunday in November schedule since like 2007. Most European countries end it on the last Sunday in October, but we found that Halloween was safer if we extended the daylight and just fell back in November when Halloween is over. Which brings us to the Sunshine Protection Act of 2023. This is the most recent effort to make daylight saving time permanent. It has been denied every time it's tried to get passed, and it hasn't been presented to Congress yet this year, though, so who knows what will happen with that. If it gets passed, though, I don't think people will like it, and it might cause more states to opt out because they don't want to deal with the dark mornings of the winter. I am staunchly team standard time.
Same. Why do they keep trying to make it saving time permanent?
Because they really enjoyed those long summer days.
Idiots.
I think that's why it keeps not getting passed, because people love the long summer days, but they hate switching. So they're like, oh, let's just make it all the time. And then people who know better say, no, it's not really going to be a good idea. We either need to go to standard time permanently, or we need to keep switching back and forth. The days naturally get longer in the summer. Be grateful. And I'm not the only person who is against permanent daylight saving time. Medical professionals agree that having the light in the morning when you get up is incredibly important for your body and your circadian rhythm. They're also very against switching back and forth, though. The spring forward in March is especially bad for our health. There's a spike in heart attacks that we see all across the United States in early March that we don't see in Arizona. Not to mention, most of the world is already on standard time.
It's not World War II anymore.
There are some advantages, though. I get it. Supposedly, by observing daylight saving time, we're adding 3 extra years of daylight to our lives by the age of 72.
That's stupid.
I know, because it's the same daylight that you've always had. Just the clock says it's a different time.
How about you just actually enjoy the daylight and not live by what the clock tells you?
Or if people want more time after work to do yard work or whatever it is, the golfing industry, oh my gosh, they make a lot of money off of daylight saving time.
Is that right?
Yes. Capitalism in general really enjoys daylight saving time because people will be out and about buying stuff later in the evening.
Well, I think we've got the record by now to prove that anything that capitalism likes is damaging.
Daylight saving time is supposed to save energy, but because we use LEDs now and a huge chunk of the energy we use in the summer, especially in southern states, is ACs, we don't actually save that much anymore. Not to mention, we have new things that use power that do not depend on daylight, like computers and other electronics. I think it's like maybe saves you $4 a year or something. Something very insignificant. Car accidents are an interesting thing around daylight saving time. So like whenever you first switch over, there's more car accidents. But overall, during daylight saving time, the whole time period, there are less car accidents and less crime because artificial light doesn't seem to make a huge difference in reducing crime, but daylight does. Again, it's summer. The days are going to be longer anyway. And that's only for us. People who are near the equator don't even experience seasonal changes. They think that we're ridiculous. So yeah, switching back and forth, pretty bad. Not good for us. Probably should stick to standard time.
What if we draw a line horizontally across the United States, and all the northern states can be on saving time, and all the southern states can be on standard time?
So we're going to keep the time zones, but cut all the time zones in half.
Double the number of time zones. Your clocks don't change seasonally. They only change if you cross a state line.
There are people who still remember, like, kids' baseball games and stuff like that being postponed because it got too dark, and daylight saving time, pushing the clock, made it to where you could finish your game and still go home in the evenings and do dinner and bedtime and whatnot.
They didn't have lights. I used to play sports when I was a kid, and it was almost always after dark, and they had giant lights.
I don't know how old they were. I just know that they remember. They remember games getting postponed.
Every player hold a candle.
Don't run too fast. You'll blow your candle out.
Light the baseball on fire so the batter can see it.
These are the real things that we need to change.
All these better ideas for free, much better than daylight saving time. You're welcome.
The idea, though, that people just, well, the sun's gone down, it's time to go inside. We don't do that anymore. Like, it's not, our social calendar does not coincide with the solar calendar. We don't just pack up and say goodbye because the sun's going down. We do whatever we want. It's not good for our sleep, but we do.
So did Franklin. Out till 4 a.m.
Apparently had never seen the sun before noon. My sister lives in Arizona. We're technically in the same time zone, but because Utah observes daylight saving time and Arizona does not, we will not be in sync anymore. Arizona is one of those places that is very hot, and they did not see any economical advantage to extending the clock.
So that's that. Have any fun facts or PSAs?
For all you states who observe daylight saving time, it is recommended that you move your clock in 15-minute intervals to help your body transition slowly. We didn't do that. We woke up at 9 a.m. this morning, which is soon to be 10 a.m. And you're listening to this on Monday or after, so you're too late. It's over.
My PSA is this. Write your senator. Tell them we need to make standard time the standard time again. Make time standard again.
Standard time, all the time. At least we always get the hour back in the fall. Falling back is one of my favorite things about entering the darkness at the end of the year.
It's like saying shooting yourself in the foot once a year is worth it for the rest of the months where you're not shooting yourself in the foot.
I know it's hard right now, guys, but give it a few weeks. We will transition and get used to the new time, and it won't feel like we're dying anymore. But except for those of us that did die from a heart attack.
Or a car accident.
Also, people with children must absolutely despise the time change because toddlers and babies do not understand that it is a different time and that they should not be awake right now. Parents put a lot of work into those sleep schedules, and moving the clock an hour is very disruptive.
Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Thingamajigs and another exciting history of a mundane thing. Don't forget to grab a goose and spring forward into sadness.
I think strokes are also higher. Strokes, the heart attack of the brain.
Thanks for listening.
Now, go!